At nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, higher than most aircraft fly over Europe, a civilization built one of the most sophisticated cities the ancient world had ever seen. Without iron tools, without the wheel, without a written language, they were called Tiwanaku. And for over 1,000 years, they ruled the high Andes of South America with an engineering precision that still baffles modern researchers. So how did they do it? And why did they vanish? The ruins were always there. Local Aymara people had lived near them for centuries. These massive broken stones scattered across the Bolivian altiplano like the bones of something enormous and forgotten. But it wasn't until the 16th century that Spanish colonizers first documented the site, and even they seemed unsure what to make of it. Pedro Cieza de Leon, a Spanish chronicler, visited the ruins around 1549 and wrote with undisguised astonishment. He described doorways carved from single blocks of stone so large, so precisely cut, that he could not understand how human hands had moved them. Serious archaeological investigation didn't begin until the 19th and 20th centuries. Researchers from Bolivia, Europe, and the United States began excavating a site that turned out to be far larger and far more complex than anyone had imagined. What they found, spread across the flat, windswept plain just southeast of Lake Titicaca, was the core of an ancient urban center. Plazas, platforms, enormous carved monoliths, underground galleries, a sunken ceremonial courtyard lined with stone faces. This was Tiwanaku, and it had been waiting a long time to be understood. Tiwanaku was not a flash of civilization. It was a slow, steady rise that unfolded over roughly 15 centuries. The earliest evidence of settlement near the site dates to around 1500 BCE. But the city as a major political and religious center began to take shape around 100 CE, and by 600 CE, it had grown into one of the most important urban hubs in the entire Western Hemisphere. At its peak, between roughly 500 and 900 CE, Tiwanaku may have housed between 10,000 and 20,000 people within its urban core. Across its broader sphere of influence, estimates run much higher. What made them remarkable was not simply their scale, but their ingenuity in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The Bolivian altiplano is brutal. Thin air, freezing temperatures, violent seasonal frosts. Growing crops here, let alone feeding a major city, should have been nearly impossible. But Tiwanaku's agricultural engineers invented a solution. They built an elaborate system of raised fields, called sucacalas in the Aymara language, that functioned almost like a thermal battery. By digging channels between elevated planting platforms, they created a network of shallow waterways that absorbed solar heat during the day and released it at night, protecting crops from frost. Experiments in recent decades have replicated these raised fields and confirmed their stunning effectiveness. Their architecture was equally sophisticated. The builders of Tiwanaku quarried massive sandstone and andesite blocks from sites miles away, some blocks weighing over 100 tons, and transported them across land and lake using reed boats, wooden sledges, and coordinated human labor. The stones were fitted together with extraordinary precision, often using eye-shaped copper clamps driven into carved channels to lock the blocks in place. The city's great monuments, the Acapana Pyramid, the Kalisasaya Temple Platform, the Pumapunku Complex, were not random constructions. They were deliberately aligned with astronomical events. Solstices, equinoxes, the movements of stars that mattered to a people deeply attuned to the rhythms of the sky. Here is what we don't know about Tiwanaku, and the list is long. We don't know what language they spoke. There are no written records of any kind, no inscriptions, no codices, no administrative tablets. Everything we understand about this civilization has been pieced together entirely through material evidence: objects, bones, architecture, soil. We don't fully understand their political structure. Was Tiwanaku a centralized state with a powerful ruling class? A theocratic society organized around ritual? A collection of interconnected communities sharing a common identity? Archaeologists still debate the answer. And then there is Pumapunku, The Pumapunku complex is the most architecturally sophisticated section of the Tiwanaku site, and the most perplexing. Its H-shaped stone blocks, some weighing several tons, were carved with a geometric precision so fine that researchers have struggled to explain exactly what tools produced them. The edges are crisp. The angles are exact. The interlocking shapes suggest a level of planning and execution that seems almost industrial in its rigor. No one has agreed on a complete explanation for how these blocks were carved. Experimental archaeology has made progress. Stone tools and abrasive techniques can produce impressive results, but the sheer scale and consistency of the stonework remains a subject of ongoing research. These are not mysteries born of ignorance. They are mysteries born of absence. A civilization that left no words behind can only speak to us through stone. Tiwanaku did not simply sit in isolation. It was the center of a regional network, an economic and ideological force that shaped communities across a vast area of the Andes and beyond. At its height, Tiwanaku's influence reached from the Pacific coast of modern Chile and Peru into the lowland forests of Bolivia and Argentina. Colonies, trading posts, and outposts spread the city's distinctive artistic style, its bold geometric patterns, its deity imagery, its iconic Gateway of the Sun, across hundreds of miles of difficult terrain. The Gateway of the Sun, carved from a single massive block of andesite, still stands at the Calacasaya platform. Its central carved figure, often called the staff god, represents a deity that would echo through Andean religious iconography for centuries to come, reappearing in the later imagery of the Wari and the Inca. But all of this growth had a vulnerability. Tiwanaku's entire civilization was built on the productivity of the Altiplano, and the Altiplano is not stable. Between roughly 950 and 1100 CE, paleoclimatological evidence, pulled from ice cores drilled in the nearby Andes and from sediment samples at the bottom of Lake Titicaca, tells a grim story. The region experienced a prolonged and severe drought. Lake levels dropped dramatically. The raised field system, which depended on a reliable water supply, began to fail. Without agriculture, there could be no city. The population dispersed. The urban core was abandoned. The political and religious authority that Tiwanaku had accumulated over a millennium dissolved within a few generations. By 1100 CE, the great city on the Altiplano was empty. Tiwanaku did not disappear without a trace. It left an enormous imprint on the cultures that followed. The Inca, who rose to dominate the Andes centuries later, were clearly aware of Tiwanaku. They incorporated its imagery, its deity figures, and its religious symbolism into their own cosmology. Some researchers believe the Inca deliberately associated themselves with Tiwanaku's legacy as a way of claiming legitimacy, connecting their empire to the deep past of Andean civilization. Today, Tiwanaku is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it remains one of the most actively excavated archaeological sites in South America. Modern technology, ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, isotopic analysis of human remains, continues to reveal new information about the city and its people. Recent studies of skeletal remains have shown that Tiwanaku drew people from remarkably diverse geographic origins. Isotope analysis of teeth indicates that individuals who lived and died in the city's ceremonial core had grown up in distant regions, suggesting that Tiwanaku was a pilgrimage destination as well as a political capital. This was not an isolated backwater. It was a cosmopolitan center at the crossroads of the ancient Andean world. Tiwanaku flourished for over 1,000 years in one of the most inhospitable environments a civilization has ever chosen to call home. It fed its people through engineering genius. It moved mountains of stone without metal tools or wheeled vehicles. It built monuments that aligned with the stars and connected a continent through trade and belief. And then the rain stopped and it was gone. What we have recovered from the ruins represents only a fraction of what Tiwanaku was. There are still unexcavated districts beneath the Altiplano soil. There are still questions about the people's origins, their governance, their inner world. South America's ancient past is not a closed book. It is a vast archive, most of it still sealed, waiting for the next excavation, The next analysis, the next careful brushstroke that reveals one more face of a civilization we are only beginning to understand. The stones of Tiwanaku have been silent for nearly 1,000 years. But they are still here, and they still have things to say. This has been Hidden History Vault. The past never stops speaking.